Well, thank you all for being here for my presentation. I am super excited to be able to present on my research. So, we'll get this rolling. Awesome. My research is on Paul J. Rooney across the continents. So, you may be asking yourself, who is Paul J. Rooney? Because there's a lot of people who don't know who he is. So I'm going to take a few minutes to give you a little bit of an idea about who he is. He was a big game hunter, Arctic explorer, photographer, filmmaker, and spy from the early 20th century. He has been forgotten by history, and no one remembers who brought Silver King, the giant polar bear, to the Bronx Zoo, or who was the first to hunt lions with dogs in Africa, or who was the first to create a wildlife film that ran for 15 months in New York City in 1912. From his Tipple Lodge in Mississippi, Rooney headquartered his adventures and made a name for himself in the world of sport, film, and wildlife. His accomplishments have been overlooked, but Rooney's significance to film history, wildlife history, and other hunting history is important to be remembered. If it were not for Paul J. Rooney, there may never have been a Universal Studios, the Rooney Gates at the Bronx Zoo, or photography from the American intervention in Russia. He was originally from Ohio, and his father made it rich in the coke industry. Rooney was the youngest of his father's children, and he inherited $20 million. And he was called Poor Paul because he got the least amount of money from his father. By the time he died, he had amassed $60 million. So in 1923, $60 million was worth almost $2 billion today. He bought 15 acres of land in Mississippi, near a cotton plant, New Albany, Tupelo area, and he was known for having hound dogs and using them to hunt in Africa. He also served with the Red Cross. So why is Paul J. Rooney important to history? Well, he served in World War I in various different aspects. He financed expeditions and inventions, and he experimented with new hunting techniques. He brought back Silver King. He experimented with silent wildlife film. He worked with national museums, and he brought the exotic to the masses. And he was also connected with Universal Pictures. So today, because Paul J. Rooney is quite an interesting character, we're going to divide him out across the continents. I do know the Arctic is not actually a continent, but it fits well with the narrative we're putting together today. So what were his contributions? He had scientific contributions, historical contributions, and political contributions. So we're going to jump right into Africa. So what were the scientific contributions that Paul J. Rooney had in Africa? He worked with the American Museum of Natural History. You're going to see that a lot in this slide. That was one of his biggest financial investments, was to invest in that museum, and also they invested in him. He also was known for working with the Ackley camera. So Carl Ackley was a father of modern taxidermy, and he worked with Paul J. Rooney. And I found it kind of fun, some of their correspondence. Carl sent a telegram to Paul Rooney stating, "What are you doing? What are you going to do? How are you about your plans for a motion picture tour of the world? Do you ever come to New York? And if so, why the devil don't you show up?" So they had some interesting conversations between their telegrams. And he also helped Paul Rooney with his wildlife film. So from there, we go into the historical contributions in Africa. So he was the first to hunt lions with hounds. To give a little detail on that, and Shelley wrote a book called Hunting Big Game with Dogs in Africa, about a year after Rooney died in 1924. This book outlined his time with Rooney in Africa. And the first scene in the book is them sitting around the fire at his Tipple Lodge in Mississippi, and Rooney going, "Wouldn't it be royal sport to hunt African lions and leopards with these dogs?" And from there, they went to Africa and tried it. So they took their experiments with hunting and they put it into film and put together a wildlife film that ran for 15 months. And that film was distributed by Carl Laemmle. The film amassed $500,000 for Carl Laemmle, and he used that $500,000 to start Universal Studios. So what were his political contributions? Well, he worked with British East Africa in World War I. There was a source that explained how he helped build the African railroads, so they were able to get supplies, and it was also for his own benefit to help him with his hunting experiments. And He also was known for making sure the Germans stay out of British East Africa by chasing them down himself, and because of that, he was named a captain in the British Army. He's mentioned in various hunting books, like Pop Binks, who was a well-known British photographer who worked with him, and also a guy named Lowell Poppel in his book Black Laughter. And he also was instrumental in the dynamics of British East Africa, becoming a character unto his own. And there's quite a few things in that area that are either named after him or just have some resemblance of what he did there. So now we're going to move to the Arctic, and we're going to talk about his scientific contributions there. He set new records for big game hunting in the Arctic, and also worked with the American Museum of Natural History. And his historical contributions are Silver King and the Bronx Zoo. So as you see in the poster here, we have a polar bear hanging over the boat of a ship. And it was this polar bear that was called Silver King. So he brought this to the Bronx Zoo. And he followed the route of Perry. He met with the missionary Wilfred Grenfell, and he went with Captain Bob Bartlett, who captained the ship for Perry. So what were his scientific contributions in Asia? Well, he was once again under the guise of the American Museum of Natural History. He sent back specimens for the museum, and he was with Edmund Heller, who had gone with Teddy Roosevelt to Africa on Roosevelt's safari. He also filmed footage of the Bolshevik Revolution, which you can see on the screen. He took notes along the Trans-Siberian Railroad with the American intervention into Russia in 1918, and Edmund Heller traveled with him. In his political contributions, he worked alongside the American government as a spy. As you can see, this is his expense report that he turned in to the American government to detail all the money that he spent on his Czech Legion experience. And he was a photographer for the Czech Legion, and he sent back notes to the United States about weapons supply and how things were going. From there, we go to Europe. Once again, he's with the American Museum of Natural History. He also took photographs for the Red Cross, specifically for France. He traveled with the Harvard group, and one of the guys on the boat with him from Harvard stated they were trying to get a film of a gun going off, and as they take the film, the gun actually is loaded and ends up hitting one of the boats, and when they land in France, the poor guy who sent the gun off was arrested. But it was all for Rainey's film footage, so it's all right? He did also work with the British and Britain, East Africa, as I mentioned earlier. His political contributions are that he served with the Red Cross in France. He's also mentioned in a telegram to Pershing. Newton Baker introduces him to Pershing. From there we have North America, where, once again, the Museum of History. He works with Carl Ackley with the camera, Edmund Heller, John C. Hemmett, who is a famous photographer as well, and he financed other scientists of the day. His movie that ran for 15 months, and also known for local legends in Mississippi. From there, he had letters from the Department of Interior about hunting. He worked with political leaders during World War I. And then that brings us to the end. So why Paul J. Rooney? Well, he was a financier. He made major contributions to history, science, and politics. He had many connections. There were connections I didn't get to, like railroads and music. He's lost to time and history. But there's historical value in researching Paul Rooney. And also, fun fact, he's mentioned in William Faulkner's book, The Reivers. So he's not only a historical character, he's also a literary figure. So there we go. Thank you very much.